Welcome back. Let's see, on this, the last day of class that we meet, I can't believe it's 10 weeks, but hey, here we are. We will be going, when I return, this is the pre-recorded section. When I return, we'll be going over the preferred answers for the midterm, as well as any modifications I've made to the final. Because as I've stated before, the final consists of, the first half of the final is the midterm. Up to the point of this broadcast, we'd already covered a lot of parts of the final, and I'm also supplementing that, so going to be testing you on that knowledge as well. As always, as I'll explain, we will, it'll be take-home open book. You will have time to complete the final and get any papers that you haven't done, and hopefully as a result of having the class, you will become less addictive than you were when you started. So basically, let's see, I've thrown out a lot of different concepts here that are in fact tools. That if you understand what they are, so in terms of like Notarianism basically says, okay, the way you know yourself is you have to study the world, and you use the sciences to do that. So if you relate to the stars, if the stars attract you, you should learn about the stars. If numbers attract you, numbers describe the world as easily as words. So if mathematics is your thing, great. If words is your thing, great. If music is your thing, is the way that you know the world, great. If sitting out in nature is it, then you should study what those things are. So within Notarianism, basically the idea is the lessons of the world. Life is a school, and the way you work out your problems helps transform the world. So one of the concepts that had been relatively recently, that is in the time period between I went to school and the time period that I started teaching, we could observe lots of things in nature, but not necessarily understand from a scientific point of view what was going on. And so continuing on this theme of transformation from an addicted state to a non-addictive, recovering, thriving state. It's kind of like moving from being a larval stage to a butterfly or a dragonfly. Now, there is a, this is college. So, phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny. That is, a species, a phylum, recapitulates evolution. Okay? So we started out, each of us started out as two cells uniting. So we went from two separate cells to becoming one cell to becoming multiple cellular creatures. And during that gestation stage within the mom's womb, our mother's womb, we went from two separate cells to one cell to multiple cells, and then those cells started becoming in the process of differentiation. So if you remember that slide from a long time ago where they're talking about, okay, where does nicotine addiction begin? We're studying that. So when multiple cells become nerve, become muscle, become skeleton, where is it that the receptors for acetylcholine form? And how can we investigate that process? So the reason I'm talking about that is there's been a concept recently, more or less recently discovered, called imaginal cells, which has captivated some folks, and myself included, in terms of looking at, oh, well, how would this work as a meme for teaching people transformation? Because humans don't necessarily go through metamorphosis. They don't. But actually we did in the womb. We went from 2 cells that became 1 to multi-cell to a family of cells working together. Except in the case of cancer, which, yeah, we'll go beyond that. The idea is this. We also went through in our various gestational stages, becoming like a fish. We had gills, all of us were female, and then eventually became male or some part of the continuum. We became like a mammal, became like a reptile, let's say, so it was fish, reptile, mammal, and then finally human. And that was the last stage. And then we were born as human. So in one sense, we did already go through that phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny. We did go through the entire course of evolution on the planet within the womb. And now here we are. And then the, shall we say, the manifestation, shall we say, the metamorphosis kind of continues on an internal level. So, imaginal work. Now, what I mean by imaginal is not in your imagination, though it could be. There is a creature, so creatures that go through metamorphosis, the adult form of that creature is called the imago. Imago. All right? So anything that goes through that transformation starts as a larva, and then it goes either into a pupa or a chrysalis or some other stage, cocoon stage, and then the adult form that emerges is the imago. And I'll show you how this works in graphic form because the picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So larva is the form that comes out of the egg. The larva eats, has multiple forms, look way different than the adult form, and then goes into a stage of pupation or a chrysalis or a cocoon, and then emerges later as the adult form, the imago. Okay, and that's where we get the word imaginal, which might be related to imagination, but this is actually happening. So, imaginal work. All right, so there's a blog reference. I believe it's still hot. So here's the story. Okay? The caterpillar's new cells are called imaginal cells. So here's where the story takes off, right? The caterpillar emerges from the egg. It eats and eats and eats and eats and eats. Right? Has a nervous system, has muscles, has eyes, antenna, multiple legs, probably many more legs. And so if we're describing insects which have 6 legs, then essentially we're basically talking about going from a multiple-legged caterpillar to a 6-legged creature, right? So once the caterpillar eats and eats and eats and then spins a cocoon or its chrysalis or a pupa or whatever, then what happens? So we've only recently figured out what happened. We've observed this for all the millennia that humans have been observing the natural world and seeing this, but until we had the ability to actually see the DNA structure, we didn't actually know what was going on. We just observed it. So this imaginal work has basically been discovered in the last, say, 2 decades. So the caterpillar's new cells are called imaginal cells. They resonate at a different frequency. They're so totally different from the caterpillar cells that his immune system thinks that they are enemies and gobbles them up. Chomp, gulp. But these new imaginal cells continue to appear, more and more of them. So the process that's being described here is that how does a caterpillar become a butterfly? So what happens in the pupa, because unless you actually observe this, what they have observed is that the caterpillar eats and eats and eats, spins the cocoon, and then becomes still. So apparently what happens is the caterpillar essentially almost goes to sleep. And so what happens inside the chrysalis is that the structure of the caterpillar still exists, but begins to deform under the influence of these imaginal cells. Now, when they've seen this in the laboratory, observed it with, for example, fruit flies, the parts of the DNA, because all of this happens because of DNA, so it's like within our DNA, except we don't necessarily, we don't actually shapeshift, but within creatures that do go through metamorphosis like many insects do, what happens inside the pupa, the cocoon, the chrysalis, is that it essentially, the caterpillar structure dissolves, the physical structure dissolves and becomes kind of like a goo. Out of that goo, imaginal cells start forming. They come out of the DNA. It seems like they come out of nowhere, nothing. And initially, the caterpillar's immune system, which is still functioning, recognizes the imaginal cells as a threat and begins eating them. It begins attacking them as alien. The challenge that happens with this, and in the beginning, the imaginal cells are losing, but more and more start emerging out of nowhere. And so what the imaginal cells are is the adult structure of the being that's going to form. All right, can't become a caterpillar anymore. The structure of the caterpillar has disappeared. All we've got is goo, DNA goo, right? Pretty soon, the caterpillar's immune system cannot destroy the imaginal cells fast enough. More and more of the imaginal cells survive, and then an amazing thing happens. The little, tiny, lonely imaginal cells start to clump together into friendly little groups. They all resonate together at the same frequency, passing information from one to another. Then after a while, another amazing thing happens. The clumps of imaginal cells start to cluster together. A long string of clumping and clustering imaginal cells, all resonating at the same frequency, all passing information from one to another there inside the chrysalis. Now, the reason this sounds kind of new agey and resonating, because remember what happens inside a liquid environment. In a liquid environment, all right, you're not necessarily simply physically passing structure, you're not doing physical communication, you're also using various frequencies, not necessarily of sound, but of light, that we may or may not be able to detect. So as an example, from the point of view of humans studying this, the imaginal cells, you know, we can see the structure of the DNA, but all of a sudden, these imaginal cells start coming out of nowhere. So something is clearly creating them, and we presume it's DNA, but when we're observing this, we can't, it seems to be coming out of nowhere. Where are these things coming from? Just out of this goo. So talking about resonance in a liquid environment is one poetic way of describing, okay, something's happening that we can't see. We can't see the vibrations, we can't see how this is happening, but the immune system of the caterpillar, we can see that the immune system is attacking something. It recognizes that there's an enemy, even though it may or may not know that, well, this is actually what I'm going to be transforming into. Doesn't recognize that. But the imaginal cells basically start swarming, they clump together, and then pretty soon they eventually start eating the caterpillar's immune system for lunch once they get big enough. And essentially, again, and they start forming the new structure of the new creature. So the new creature still is going to have to breathe, The new creature is still going to have a circulatory system, an immune system, different eyes, way less legs, wings, which the caterpillar couldn't have possibly imagined, right? So to describe it as clumping, resonating, different frequencies is a poetic way of looking as we can't see the process step by step, but we do see the result. So with an imaginal work, a wave of good news travels throughout the system, lurches and heaves, but not yet a butterfly. Then at some point, the entire long string of imaginal cells suddenly realizes altogether that it is something different from the caterpillar, something new, something wonderful, still predetermined by DNA, but unknown to the caterpillar. And in that realization is the shout of the birth of the butterfly. Happy birthday, butterfly. Since the butterfly now knows that it is a butterfly, the little tiny imaginal cells no longer have to do all those things individual cells must do. Now they are part of a multi-celled organism, a family, who can share the work. Each new butterfly cell can take on a different job. There is something for everyone to do, and everyone is important. And each cell begins to do just that very thing it is most drawn to do, and every other cell encourages it to do just that. A great way to organize a butterfly, a transformed being that's different than its larval form, and that the larval form could not have conceived of, but is still implied within the DNA. So as an example, picture, so this is various stages of a monarch butterfly. Caterpillar, it's basically spinning the chrysalis. And in that latter stage, on your right, screen right, has become the chrysalis. This is a swallowtail, tiger swallowtail butterfly, caterpillar, chrysalis, and then the newly emergent butterfly. So if you can see obviously you can see the difference. Multi-legged creature, very few antenna, no antenna, to a creature with antenna, more evolved eyes, different mouth parts, 6 legs, shorter abdomen, and wings. A simulated crop circle, basically talking about a transformed human being. And then, since human beings are also part of the earth, the consciousness of humans transforming themselves also is part of the transformation of a planet. And here's swarms of butterflies taking off. And then the meme of Da Vinci's man within a fractal butterfly wings image here. More on that later. So, in order to think outside of the box, remember this. The box contains what you've been taught in the matrix of domination. That is your caterpillar stage, all the things you need to know as a caterpillar, but doesn't necessarily, it wants to keep you boxed in. Won't necessarily think of transformational work or have you conceive of transformational work or any kind of work or any kind of existence outside of the addictive matrix. So in order to move out of that, you also have to know that there's a box to get out of. And we've talked about this, so essentially these are tesseracts, multi-dimensional. So you start with a box, that is the cube. Then outside the cube, there are forces that shape the cube, but there are also forces within the cube that also contain the seeds of its expansion. And then each one of these forms is yet a higher dimension of the four-dimensional tesseract above those. So these are fifth and sixth dimensions. Again, we used this meme already. So this is a 10-dimensional tesseract, basically higher dimension of these particular things. Takes a little effort to see it. The idea is this. So in 1983, I was, this article appeared in Scientific American. So this was a theory of, not a theory, but 11 dimensions. So this is also in terms of quantum physics and string theory. In order for string theory to work, you also need 11 dimensions. I talked about, and this is a shout out to Saul Paul Sarag, Dr. Saul Paul Sarag, a theoretical physicist, who when I met him was at the Stanford Linear Accelerator and lives here in Eugene. So when I discussed this article with him in '83, he said, oh yeah, well, it's Scientific American. We actually believe there's 48, or up to 48, but it's Scientific American. Most Americans can't even think of 11 dimensions. That's tricky already. It's actually, we think it's 48, but okay. So we started enumerating them, all right? The hidden dimensions of space-time, 1983 Scientific American, I don't know which month, but it's in there. And this has been incorporated into other bodies of thoughts, okay? So the basic idea that I'm using it for here is the reality that humans are multi-dimensional beings already. So all that talk I was talking about in imaginal is not just a metaphor, it's a reality. We are multi-dimensional beings already. But addiction causes us to limit ourselves or our point of view to a single line or a single square, not looking at other dimensions, right? So string theory and quantum physics holds that there are, say, 11 dimensions. Okay, so the first is a line. So length. Second dimension, length and width. You square the line. Okay, so you get a square, length and width. Third dimension, square the square. You get a cube, length, width, and depth. Fourth dimension, space-time. Now, there's lots of different ways of conceiving how space-time works. They may all be an illusion. Einstein said, look, our view of space-time and reality may be an illusion. The idea that it's the past, present, and future may be an illusion. It may be simply convenience, a convenience we use to basically stay sane. Actually, it might be, so when we talk about, if we were using this visually, we talk about the space-time continuum. The idea of a continuum itself is that, okay, you have the past, you have this present moment, and you have the future. Well, this may be simply a point of view for us, for convenience to time bind. We can't see the future, except in déjà vu, which in French means already have seen, which means, from this point of view in the present, you see something that may be the future. Is it really the future, or what? So talking about the fourth dimension, space-time, right? So things that we already experience and we have words for. So alternate universe or parallel universe, alternate universe, the idea of Schrodinger's cat, where there are alternate universes created at the subatomic level that split out from each particular moment, parallel universes that could exist. Or you could think of the universe as basically like a CD where all times exist simultaneously somewhere. The Australian Aborigines refer to it as the dream time. There's no past, present, or future in their language. It's all the dream time, all things that are possible are already happening, will happen, have happened. All you have to do is sing to get them via the song lines. In any case, space-time, all those concepts and probably other things that we can't conceive. That's the fourth dimension. Fifth dimension, back to slide, please. Electromagnetism. You can't have an electrical signal without a magnetic field. You can use magnetism to generate electricity. Maybe they're the same force in another dimension, and the only way that we can perceive them is this phenomenon we call electromagnetism. That's the fifth dimension. Sixth dimension, the strong nuclear force, the force that holds atoms together. Seventh dimension, the weak nuclear force. Radiation, what happens when you split the atom. The 8 through 11 dimensions are subatomic quantum forces that I can't even begin to describe from my vocabulary or my understanding, but essentially that was how it was explained to me. Where's gravity in this? Where are quarks and muons and all these things? Subatomic quantum forces, 8 to 11. In any case, whatever this means to you, you have in your pockets and purses a quantum device that is working off of the science that is your cell phone. Okay? So the basic science of your cell phone, like I've said before in class, is 150 years old. But we had to evolve through using wired phones to getting wireless phones, using the same science, essentially. The idea, point being, you can only perceive and manipulate dimensions you are outside of, meaning we are all outside of all of them, those 11 dimensions. We are multi-dimensional beings because we already manipulate those quantum and other forces as part of our daily life, though you may or may not know or realize that you were doing that. So what this means in terms of personal transformation is that not only it's possible, it's actually necessary as the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. The only thing that's holding us up is that our own conscious evolution is being halted usually, and the means you most used to do this is addiction, and induced ignorance addictions in particular. Okay? So outside of the box, the world is multispectral, that is, multiple spectrums of light, vibration, sound, radioactivity, radiation, multidimensional, basically to see it in black and white, or red and blue, or to be colorblind is actually not to see or not to perceive. So there's multiple dimensions that you can use that we already are using beyond the framework that we have been taught. So using that concept to talk about, this is basically from the idea about the tesseracts and higher dimensions. So remember what I said about the line, the dimensions, length and width, length and depth, space-time, magnetism, electromagnetism. So the upper left-hand corner, right? Two-dimensional cube, and then a three-dimensional cube, and then a four-dimensional cube, that is space-time, fifth-dimensional cube, electromagnetism, sixth-dimensional cube, strong nuclear force, seventh-dimensional cube, weak nuclear force, eight-dimensional, 8, 9, and 10. There's actually an 11th dimension, but I didn't really talk about it. But here's the metaphor that I'm going to be using in terms of looking at transformation. Length and width, and depth, length, width, depth, space-time, length, width, depth, space-time, electromagnetism, length, width, depth, space-time, electromagnetism, strong nuclear force. Length, width, depth. Space-time, electromagnetism, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force. And beyond those 11 dimensions, the human being. So, in terms of transformation, moving into different dimensions, thinking and feeling, becoming aware of what your thoughts and your feelings are, where they come from. That's the second dimension, the cube. Thinking, feeling. What are your thoughts? What are the memes you're acting out? Feeling. What are the feelings you are feeling? Where are they centered? That's one of the first elementary steps. Thinking, feeling, doing. In psychology, when they talk about obsessive compulsive behavior, obsessive compulsive behavior as part of addiction means you think of something, you have an impulse, and you do it without thinking. It's basically lizard brain. Think, feel, do. Without thought. Doing without looking at the consequences. So, to be able then to move to a place, instead of going from thinking and feeling and doing without thought, thinking, feeling, doing, reflect on what you have done, and then project into the future alternative thought. So that's actually using angel brain. Okay? This is the first idea of being what an adult is. So we already know that, and we will learn in the pro class, but I've told you before, there is a developmental delay that comes from using substances that, in terms of the effect on the brain. The developmental delay means that you can have 45-year-old folks who are essentially 8 years old. Okay? And you've met them, you know them, you could even be them. Okay? Developmental delay. So it means that they may have lived 45 years, but emotionally, mentally, they're still in 8th grade or worse, or 4th grade, or whatever, in terms of emotions, in terms of being able, one, to focus, to be patient, to be able to conceive of and change behavior as a result of consequences of their actions, right? So, think, feel, do, reflect, project. Being able to reflect is basically, okay, what happened? Why did this happen? Is this something that I want to continue to have happen, or I want to change? So, this is moving out of addictive behavior, where you're beginning to think, okay, well, how might I change that behavior? Think, do, reflect, project. Think, feel, do. The next level, think of fifth cube, fifth dimensional tesseract as applied to human transformation. Think, feel, do, reflect, project, then beyond projecting, because projecting is basically, what are the possible alternative outcomes I'd like to have happen? That's just simply projecting out into the future. Proact means, okay, what are the plans that I have laid as a result of my projection? How am I going to act on those plans? And then how am I going to react to what has occurred? Because as the old adage goes, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. Certainly if you are building a skill, that is, if you're unskilled and you're practicing a new skill, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be able to react in the moment to those mistakes and then go towards your goal, whatever those are. So proact, act, react is a further development, a further dimension of angel brain. that is not simply projecting into the future, but also as a result of your new decision-making skills, reacting in real time to be able to change that behavior. So I've now reduced the previous dimensions into letters. Think, feel, do, reflect, project, proact, act, react. So rather, at the level of reaction, there is a certain amount of unconsciousness where people are reacting to situations rather than reflexively. Reacting to situations reflexively instead of thinking about them, especially if they have been caught unawares. So I'm adding 2 levels of response. So responding, okay, so that you don't necessarily react without thinking, but you respond in a way that still carries your goals forward. And then resound. So resound is basically, the only word we have in English is essentially like vibration. It's like sound. You vibrate something and then the corresponding, so for example, with a guitar, if you strike an E string, the other E string can resonate. Or if you strike an E note on any other place on the guitar other than the E string vibrates, it resonates. So, in recovery, okay, or in non-addiction, if you are resonating from a place of not being an addiction, in being calm, and somebody else is not calm, your calmness can radiate, that's using light now, or resonate with a place that's calm in them and begin to have them move towards calm, just by your very being and presence. So, next dimension, 7th dimension. Think, feel, do. Reflect, project, proact, act, react, respond, resound. The next level beyond responding and resounding is to be the change. Okay, this is a level, I'm talking about levels of development where you are, in fact, a game changer, where you are actually changing how people think, feel, and react around you. You become a person that is known throughout history for being able to do that. You, as Gandhi talked about, be the change you want to see in the world. You're at that level. You're free. And then there's other dimensions beyond that, so I'm just getting you to conceive that in terms of this transformative process, which has been talked about and for thousands of years, you can basically transform yourself into a being like that by following certain role models and following certain principles that have been integrated in the class in terms of looking at, okay, how do I get to there from where I am here and become a human being. So those dimensions of being. So, in terms of development, thinking and feeling, that's a baby. Think, feel, and do, that's a child. Children are often impulsive. Babies, basically they lie there until they learn to walk, crawl, think, feel, and do. It's the level of a child. Think, feel, do, reflect, project is adolescent, okay? Because that capacity in the brain starts developing in adolescence and continues till about 22, but still it's an adolescent. Think, feel, do, reflect, project, proact, react is the beginning of an adult level. All those things, responding, resounding, it's a practitioner. That is, you are practicing self-mastery, where you are being conscious in the transformative process and you are continually being and becoming. And then, beyond self-mastery and practicing self-mastery, you're being the change that is, you're self-actualized, you're an adept, you're a master teacher of self-mastery to others at that level. And then you becomes a mass movement. So that's part of the idea that we'll leave it here and take a short break. So Dimension 7 Beyond, the Game Changers, so many names and of those kind of folks, known and unknown, throughout history. And you can study their lives and apply them to your own. So we'll take a break here and move on to discussing the midterm, among other things. Imaginal memes. There's a hidden curriculum of emotions. So just so you know, when I throw out a term, so I try and define it for you. Hidden curriculum is the part of educational studies where, for example, you train teachers about the curriculum. So the curriculum is what's presented. So the hidden curriculum is not just what the words are, but it's also how you present it and the impact that it's going to have, both, so both the impact and the actual intent. There might be a disconnect between that, right? So for example, a syllabus reflects the content and it's part of the curriculum you're teaching there, right? So a student came to me this morning, basically said, well, I'm doing this business in town, and so I show up midway through my biology class. So I said, so you walk in late to a science class, which is content heavy. And, I didn't buy the book because the book is expensive, $250. and the instructor said, there's an optional packet. Well, do you have the packet? Well, no. She said it's optional. I said, okay, so you need to code switch. Well, what's that? Okay, code switching is you need to understand the hidden message, what she's actually telling you. So, yeah, it's optional for you to pick it up, but that's really meaning you should take her up on the option, especially if it's free, right? Because it's a content-heavy course, and it's kind of like, he was African-American, I'm African-American. I said, so if it were like a black biology teacher who was a former astronaut, you wouldn't skimp on the book or the packet, and he would not stand for you coming late to class or missing class. You wouldn't play that with him. He goes, yeah, you're right. Okay, so just because it's a white woman, she's not flipping you attitude. She's basically thinking you're not taking the class seriously. Right? Anybody would. And that's because that's the culture of science, and that's the hidden curriculum of science. We go based on the evidence. And, you may interpret it differently than I do, but, okay? So, hidden curriculum. For example, 1492, complete the rhyme. Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? Okay, so the entire curriculum is based on discovery, right? October 12, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Who did he contact? Who did he meet? Well, you know the story. Indians, right? Well, which Indians? Oh, that's not part of the story. That's a hidden curriculum. Okay? So you're teaching a historical event, but not from the point of view of everybody that's there. All right? So there's a hidden curriculum of emotions where we don't talk about them. Or the ones that we talk about are the ones that people might be familiar with, but if you are experiencing or have an experience that not a lot of people either have, does that make you crazy or does that make you extra sensitive? What? Right? So as a counselor, right, I'm supposed to be dealing with emotions, but in a classroom situation, in this culture, I can't counsel you while you're in class. That's a hidden curriculum right there. So why couldn't this be like a counseling session? Well, we're not set up to do that. Okay? You reveal in your papers some books. It might be fairly hairy to other people who are not drug counselors. But for me, it's pretty run-of-the-mill stuff. I'm not making light of it. Understand that. I'm trained to deal with that stuff. But that's not the common experience of college professors, right? So when I tell you about hidden curriculum, all right? Society's message is that you don't talk about your problems, you just suck it up. True? Right? Nobody wants to hear about your problems with your ex. Your friends, their friends, your shared friends, they get tired of you hearing about your breakup. Just suck it up. Right? Okay? So maybe you talk about it with a professional, but most people don't. And then there are the pros themselves, right? What happens to you when you basically listen to people's problems all day and don't necessarily look at your own stuff? Or what affects you from listening to people's problems all day, right? So following on the lecture around, imaginal work. How do you transform? Well, that's part of how this work gets done, especially with addictions, is understanding what's driving you. I mean, the reason I use those images about water, I'm a swimmer, right? But, when I'm in Hawaii, the Hawaiians think that I'm Jamaican. I mean, this is before I had dreadlocks. Because I surf. And most American blacks they find don't surf, let alone swim. But, I went to mostly white high schools in LA. And so when you ditch to Zuma Beach. and you surf, especially if it's in the summer and it's hot, because LA is a desert, right? So that's how I learned to swim the ocean. That's why I have the whole metaphors about water. It's like, 12-step meetings like doing lap swimming. You learn some basic skills around water, but you don't know how to do whitewater rafting. You also don't know how to do big wave surfing, right? So using that image, right? So who heals the healer? So if shrinks have one of the highest suicide rates of professionals, I think they top dentists. And I guess I could be depressed working people spit all day too. But I'm glad they're there, right? Okay, so it's almost as if Western psychology is inadequate to heal itself. Particularly if they don't teach you to explore and identify your own emotions, as well as, use the skills to deal with your emotions without necessarily having, be medicated. So that's part of a hidden curriculum as it relates to that. So, as an example, what do you do with an army psychiatrist who displays symptoms of psychosis, becomes obsessed with Muslim fratricides, and displays being out of touch with reality? Okay, so this happened with a Army major in Texas who basically decided to shoot a bunch of people, right? And this is a shrink who essentially got radicalized, right? Another piece is, what do you do with psychiatrists who remain out of touch with your reality, which is actually much more common? So, so part of the hidden curriculum is, I'm saying, up front, heal yourself. Have the capacity to heal yourself. Consult with professionals who are able to increase your skill to do that. Be selective. But in case you don't run into professionals, there's some little basic things you can do. There's a saying from Yeshua in the Gospel of Thomas: if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Now, I interpret this as many times great art is produced out of expressing emotions that are difficult in some form that you can do visually or auditorially. There's a Frank Zappa. I don't know if you know who Frank Zappa was, but Frank Zappa, very avant-garde, very excellent guitar player, kind of like, he basically used elements of free jazz, which is where you just play whatever, but almost like Steely Dan, except not as commercial as Steely Dan. So I'm talking about rock groups from the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, but they're technically proficient, advanced musicians. So Frank did this kind of stuff where he talked about sometimes words fail you, but you can always find a chord that sounds ugly enough to express what you want to say, right? Or painting is your thing, or gardening, or whatever. So talking about being able to bring out those emotions. So when I've talked about emotional equations, and basically talking about algebra being like the mending, and basically saying that, okay, this is a tool for basically developing a self-care curriculum for yourself, where if you're afraid of something, there might be a good reason for it, but that's an indicator that that's something you should get friendly with and know what it is and explore it till it's not fearful for you anymore. All right, so depression, D-N. So, for example, anger denied, the basic equation where this is coming from is that suicide equation that I talked about. Anger denied expression multiplied becomes depression. So you could basically see that depression is a form of stuffed anger. And if you come from a culture that doesn't allow you to express your anger or identify your anger. And in this culture, notice who is allowed in the hidden curriculum to have their anger. Right? So I seem fairly calm now, and I am fairly calm and chill because, doing class, but delivering this material. Oh, angry black man. Not pissed off about what you did to me. I'm pissed off about what you're doing to them. So, yeah, I could be angry, but not personally. It's not about that. I'm angry at injustice, so that's actually a good thing. So, anger denied expression multiplied becomes depression. Depression multiplied must be transformed, or various addictive behaviors can develop. So transformation starts with acknowledgement. You do the hard things first. Do the things you're scared of, because truth is often we're often afraid of the truth. So we're afraid to approach it. And the closer you get to it, the scarier it gets, until you realize, oh, that's not really such a big deal. So do the hard things first. Go to the center of the pain, or ucky, or just quoting my 3-year-old granddaughter, ucky. It's not English, right? You knew what I was talking about. Take, for example, relationship with a couple. It's not 1 + 1 by itself. It could be 1x plus 1x. And I'm not talking about your x's, but that could be the x. X is the unknown. Okay? The things that you hide. Is there baggage, past relationships, current kids? That's the X, right? Because when we're meeting people, whether online or do we show our baggage on the first meeting? Oh, no. You might not even get it. You might never get it, right? But you should assume that it's there. But here's what happens. Because it's in your consciousness, and you are an energetic, dynamic system, your life, energetic, dynamic system, your X, your baggage, interacts with their X on what we'll call an unconscious level. Actually, it might even be, the X's might be attracting each other and working stuff out maybe working stuff out successfully or interacting. Your fears might multiply. Something I might do might cause my ex to feel, or my partner to feel uncomfortable. Certainly, for example, as a musician, right? So there's a stereotype about musicians being, somewhat extravagant with their relationships. Free, right? So I know people, not just musicians, but, people who've been, who are my age that have had like over 200 or 300 sexual relationships. To my 30. So, my partner may think I'm a slut, but compared to other folks, that's nothing. Right? Nothing. But, so there might be past pain from past relationships. And that's going to be part of that X. Abuse. Could be relationship addiction. So, part of the hidden curriculum within our society is nobody was talking about this. We don't go to relationship school. We don't necessarily train you to deal with this kind of stuff. So one of the things I like to do is talk about, what is your art? How do you express the creative within you so it can be known and seen? So that even if you're not working this out with a person, at least you can understand this is what this means to me. And at least I know how I tick. And then you can explain it to somebody. So emotions are energy. And energy exists in many forms, such as heat, light, chemical energy, and electrical energy, also magnetism. Energy is the ability to bring about a change or do work. That's a dictionary definition. And thermodynamics is the study of energy. So first law of thermodynamics, energy can be changed from one form to another, but it cannot be created or destroyed. In essence, it can be converted from one form into another. So emotions, being energy, can change into many forms and into other emotions. That's why that equation basically saying that anger, here's how anger could get transformed into depression. And if you understand that some forms of depression are just simply accumulated but stuffed anger, the energy of the anger hasn't gone away, it's building up. And it has to be relieved. There has to be a release valve somehow, somewhere. There's another way of looking at it from a native point of view, that emotions can change. The native psychology, particularly Navajos, so some of their myths, or what we call myths from a Western point of view, are not myths at all. It's their science. It's their psychology. Anger is like, say a particular animal, and they can change into many forms and many other emotions. And so the idea is that you're stalking or tracking the emotions, like they leave a track. And then they shapeshift into something else. And so you recognize, okay, that's now changed into something else. And if the tracks abruptly end, then, oh, well, this is now turned into something that either went underground or up a tree or flew away, transformed. It's still around somewhere, right? So what kind of animal is it? What kind of track did it leave? Did it shapeshift into something else? So if you start with a basic vocabulary of emotions, like how many can you name? Like in a map. And then you can do an emotional cartography. So cartography is about map making. So we'll put a definition on them and also add this from brain research and physics. So where do you feel the emotion in your body? Where is the emotion stored in your body? What drugs or food or processes go along with the emotion? Like I admit to indulging in potato chips and salsa under stress. I was at the board meeting the other day talking about basically the cultural competency policy and how I'm all for it, and faculty of color are all for it, and a whole bunch of people are all for it. But we're getting resistance from our union, our so-called leadership. They say, no, you're not representing us on this. Sorry, you're not. Students want this too. And don't be saying that the students are being duped by the administration, because that's basically disrespectful. Like, yeah, anyway. So, did a short 3-minute speech, but I was still riled up enough, and it was cold enough, so I should have actually gone for a walk, except what I did was basically stuff it with potato chips instead. So, understanding our feelings. Basic beginning emotional vocabulary. Joy is past or pleasant or present pleasure. Feels like you're filled with warmth, nurturance, and are energized and filled with life. Happiness is present emotional fulfillment. The experience of meeting our needs feels like you're lovable, capable, proud of yourself, and recognized by those that are important to you. Fear. You can look at fear from the point of view of, for example, the movie After Earth. So there is a meme about fear where it's false evidence appearing Real. And the meme from the movie After Earth, which is Will Smith and Jaden, the young, his son, basically saying, look, danger is very real. So don't get it twisted. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. Fear is a choice to let your emotions rule you and let the fear, the presence of danger, take over. So sometimes the best survival choice is actually choosing to understand that there's danger and meeting it with calm or courage. So fear is awareness of present danger or the expectation of future danger. So anxiety is future hurt or fear of future hurt. So one of the messages from the movie is basically, unless you're in danger right now, fear is about what happened to you or what you're anticipating might happen to you. So it's in the future. It isn't present now. Or it happened in the past, so you're still scared of it. But it's a choice. Either way. Now, danger can be handled in a number of ways, logically and calmly, and that's probably the most effective, certainly we know from counseling, yoga, or martial arts. So, anxiety is the expectation of hurt or loss. It feels like something bad is going to happen. Hurt is present pain. The experience of loss or injury feels like sadness or depletion. Anger is past or present pain unexpressed. The outward expression of hurt, recent or remote, it feels like wanting to hurt someone. And sometimes that someone is you, so you'll actually turn the anger inward, particularly if society has said you can't express emotions. Society or the abuser or whatever. Guilt is past pain unexpressed. It's anger held in and turned against yourself. It feels like you're bad and deserve punishment. Depression. Past pain, chronically unexpressed. It's a pattern of reacting to all hurt by holding in anger. Feels like your energy is depleted and you feel lifeless. So part of the piece of this is what we use to train counselors. And we take them through a process in which you identify your own emotions so that if you're feeling something and you're not feeling depressed yourself, but you're feeling depression coming from the client as a result of what they've said, that's what they're feeling. So you name that emotion and it helps them name that emotion too. And don't be afraid to do that. And don't be afraid that it might be off the wall, because if you're feeling it and it isn't coming from you, it's in the room. So talk about it. All right. So here's the answers, the preferred answers to the midterm. So name the 5 views of addiction: sin, disease, maladaptive behavior, koyaanisqatsi, and addiction is slavery. 3 types of addiction: ingestive, process, and poly. Poly, want a cracker? When addiction is a maladaptive behavior, it's a learned behavior. Educate the addict. So which one is not a major concept in the disease model? That the addict is irresponsibly, willfully misbehaving. That is the point of view of sin. Disease model says that it's a disease. Genetic predisposition to addiction is only proven, quote unquote, with which substance? Alcohol. What you inherit with genetic predisposition is a higher tolerance for alcohol. I don't know why somebody always checks THIQs when I never mention them. The theory is out there. It's been disproven. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. A drug is a substance that changes the function of living tissue. Which of the following are not process addictions? Lots of folks are not clear about this, so to get clear about it, the eating disorders are not process addictions. They're ingestive. Polyaddiction and cross-addiction refer to many types of addiction and the fact that addictions may overlap. And circle the one that's not one of the three factors in addiction from the point of view of the scientific community, corporate responsibility. Yes, corporations have a role. No question about it. But why would you trust them? Okay, and that's also part of the hidden curriculum. You trust what you see on television. And that's part of why when I was talking about the other day about four arguments for the elimination of television and gerrymander saying the colonization of experience, what you believe, there has been a number of people, this is an old study from like the 60s, basically, where almost half of people polled believed that they couldn't put it on television unless it was true. In a commercial.
One time my uncle told me that aliens exist because he read about them on the internet and nothing on the internet is false.
Yes, right. I mean, there's that too.
I didn't even know how to respond to that.
Yeah, sure. So part of the piece that goes along with that is, okay, well, what is reality, and how do you believe what you believe, and are your beliefs true or real, or all those other kinds of things. So basically, Mander basically also cited as part of that is that when the television show Doc Marcus Welby MD was on, that NBC received like 250,000 letters in a year asking the fictional doctor for medical advice. Right? So the internet basically takes the power of television and multiplies it. So a person in a primary relationship with an active addict is referred to as a codependent. Most people got that. 4 elements of money: health, spend less than you make, pay yourself first, invest what you save, plan. 4 types of money-related addictive behaviors: chronic debting, overspending, gambling, chasing the next big deal. The safe dosage for alcohol. So understand, safe's in quotes. Okay, if you are treating it like it was any other drug, there's a safe and effective dose for it. All our problems come from overdosing, right? That would be 0.02. So to say there is no safe dose, well, yeah, for a pregnant woman, for kids, for people under 21, yeah, right. You have reverse liver tolerance. So, purpose of an addiction: to obscure a positive or negative internal emotion or mental process. Copy, thank you. Addictions can be broadly broken into 2 categories: process and ingestive. Binge drinking of alcohol is defined as 4 doses for women, 4 to 5 doses for men within a 2-hour period, keeping with the definition that we have set for what a dose of alcohol is. Beware of standard drink definitions, because then you'll think 4 AMFs is okay. Physiological binge drinking sets up a rapid tolerance and withdrawal and eventually addiction syndrome. Quality not found in addictive system: the ability to tell the whole truth and determine what's real. The following: the only substance without addictive potential is water and oxygen, though there are oxygen bars in LA. Don't ask. The neurotransmitter that LSD and Prozac act on, serotonin. Neurotransmitter is chemicals used specifically by nerve cells to communicate with other nerve cells, but we also know that has an expanded definition, but that will suffice. Marijuana contains which chemical, which resembles which neurotransmitter, THC and anandamide. 3 types of process addictions, pretty much, as long as you didn't do eating disorders, you got the point, you got it. Nicotine most resembles acetylcholine. Following behaviors constitute drug addiction. If you did all of the above, that works. 4 ways of the fourfold way. Most people were able to do that, as well as the shadow side in the same order. So that's good. That's about reading. The acronyms and serum serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Best describes epigenetics, how the external environment affects us at the molecular level, and how the external environment affects us in ways that can be passed on genetically, which I feel is the best answer. In epigenetics, a tag is like a volume knob. Lipton used the following analogy: the body's like a car with a driver who doesn't know how to drive it. Famine study cited in the epigenetics paper for poor nutrition led to heritable disease conditions in the fetus. 4 epigenetic disease conditions. Most people got that. Just do the reading and you got it. And the last one. So, depending on how you do this, so I've said 10, but if you do the math, you could also get an answer that would be 13 or 16. So I accepted those. 5.5 doses in a 40 ounce of St. Ides malt liquor. Long Island iced tea is like 5 to 6 doses. Jaeger bomb, depending on how it's made, whichever recipes you see, 1 to 2 doses. Shot of Jack's is 1. So, want you to go to whatever your optimal place is during the holidays. And if we see you again for the prose class, I would not find that amiss. The final will be up on the Moodle website in approximately 10 minutes. It has been a pleasure. Go well, stay well.
Do you happen to have the midterms, the old ones?
They might be in that box. Last name by Alpha.
Just go through it?
Yes, go through it.
Seems scary.
Yeah, thanks.
Online.